factoring trinomials when the leading term is not a 1. So yesterday when we did trinomials, all of our leading terms had a 1 in front of the x squared. So today, our trinomials are going to be a little bit more complex because we don't have a leading term of a 1. We have another number besides a 1 as that leading term. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by making a table much like we did yesterday. Except for our table, our multiply number is going to come from the last number times the first number. Okay, so instead of just using the last, yesterday we had a leading term of 1, so first times last would have been like 1 times 5. Okay, but since we have another number besides a 1 there, we have to multiply first times last. So we're going to multiply to get first number times last number. So what is 6 times 5? 30. So we're going to multiply to get 30 in our table and add to get 17. And everything's positive here. We're going to start out all positives. So y'all give me some factors that multiply to get 30. 15 and 2. 1 and 30. 5 and 6. 3 times 10. And I think that's all the factors we have of 30. Do any of those pairs add to get 17? Yeah, the first one does, because y'all are so smart like that. Now, we cannot go straight from the table to the answer like we did yesterday, because we got to multiply to get 6x squared in the front, not just x squared in the front. So we would just stick our x's in front yesterday and make our binomials. That doesn't happen today. What we have to do today is take this trinomial and split it into a 4-term polynomial. So that's what we're going to do. So where they had a 17x in the middle, we're going to replace it with these two numbers with x's. So we're going to split the 17x up into a 15x plus a 2x. So we're going to keep the 6x squared. And then instead of 17x in the middle, we're going to say plus 15x plus 2x. And then we're going to keep the plus 5 on the end. So it's kind of like substitution. They had 17x right there. These two things equal 17x when I combine them. So I'm just splitting it in two, and I got that from my table. Okay? So now we have a polynomial with 4 terms. And how do we factor a polynomial with 4 terms? Grouping. Factor by grouping. So after we do grouping, we'll be done. Okay? So you use your table to split up the middle term. And then after you do that, you do factor by grouping. And that's it. And we already know how to do factor by grouping. We group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. And then we find the GCF of the first terms. So what is 6x squared plus 15x's GCF? 3. And what about my variables? 3x. Very good. Parentheses. What times 3x multiplies to get 6x squared? 2x. Plus what times 3x is 15x? 5. Any questions about that one? All right, copy the plus in the middle. And what's our GCF between the next 2 terms? 1. Because there's no numbers besides 1 that go at a 2 and a 5, and they both don't have an x. So it's just 1. And what's 1 times 2x? Or what multiplies times 1 to get 2x is what I should say. And what multiplies times 1 to get 5? 5. And do I have the same thing in both parentheses? So what are my 2 binomials for my answer? Very good. 2x plus 5. And then remember from factor by grouping, we copy what's not in parentheses and squish it together into a binomial. 3x plus 1. And there's my 2 factors. And you can do a quick check without foiling everything out. And just check the first term and last term. It's 2x times 3x, 6x squared. And it's 5 times 1, 5. And if you want to check the middle too, you can go ahead and multiply it all out. And that's just one way that you can quickly check it. All right, let's do number B. Problem B here. But that's it. The only thing different about your tables, you have to do first times last. And then after you do your table, you split the middle term with those two numbers. Okay? So, on this one, we want to find numbers that multiply to get what number? 5 times 10 is 50. And that add to get 27. So everything is positive again. That makes life a little bit easier. So what's some things that multiply to get 50? 5 times 10. 1 times 50. 2 times 25. Do any of those add to get 27? Yeah. Does it matter what order I do them in? It does not. However, these are both positive, so we got to keep plus signs. And if we're writing them in the middle and doing factor by grouping, your work might look differently than mine or somebody else's, but you still should get the same binomials when you finish. So I split the middle term into a 2x and a 25x. And now how many terms do I have? 4. And how do we factor with 4 terms? Factor by grouping. So I'm doing mine this way. Some of y'all swap the 25 and the 2, so your GCF and stuff will be a little different. But it should come out to be the same 2 at the end. So I have 5x squared plus 2x. What's my GCF? 1. What about variables? X. What times x is 5x squared? 5x. And what times x is 2x? 2. Close parentheses. Plus, what's my GCF between the next two terms? 5. Any variables? No variables in common. Parentheses. What times 5 is 25x? And what times 5 is 10? 2. And I have the same thing in both parentheses, so what are my two binomials? And x plus 5. And quick check, it's 5x times x, 5x squared. It's 2 times 5, 10. All right. Questions so far? Okay, look at C. Let's start putting some negative signs in there for us. So on C, 2x squared minus 13x plus 6. We want two numbers that multiply to get what number? 12. And that add to get what number? Now, if I multiply to be positive but add to be negative, what kind of signs do I need? Two negatives. Thank you. And what are some factors that multiply to get 12? Negative 1, negative 12. Negative 2, negative 6. But we know we've got to add to be more than 12, right? Yeah. So the one that's going to work is what? All right. Now what do? Yeah. Give them both an x and put them in the middle, right? So 2x squared minus 1x minus 12x plus 6. Then what? Group. Does it matter what order I put my 2 in the middle? No, but if you do it and somebody else is doing it too, you might get a different work, but you will get the same answer. So what's my GCF between 2x squared and 1x? X. Parentheses, what times x is 2x squared? Minus what times x is negative x? Negative 1. Now this is a minus in the middle, so we got to think about it a little bit differently when there's a minus in the middle. What's the GCF between 12x and 6? 6. Parentheses, what times negative 6 is negative 12x? Well, what times a negative is a negative? A positive, yeah. And then what times a negative is a positive? A negative. So I need a negative right here. And what times 6 is 6? 1. Does that make sense? Do I have the same thing in both? So what are my two answers? Very good. Questions? Anybody? Okay. A little more negatives in this one. We want two numbers that multiply to get what number? Yeah, -4, because it's 2 times -2. And we want to add to be what? -3. So if I multiply to get a negative, what kind of signs am I going to need? Yep, one of each. And the bigger one will be a negative. So for 4, I've only got -4 and 1 and -2 and 2, right? And do any of those add to get -3? Yeah. Now, I said it does not matter which one of the factors I put in the middle first. However, when I have one of each, I would rather have a plus sign in the very middle of my 4 terms. Because that way I'm not having to do the negatives in my head like I had to do over here. Does that make sense? So to do that, I would like to arrange it. If I have one of each, to the negative and then the positive. So there's a plus sign in the very middle of my polynomial. That's just preference. You don't have to do that. It's just the way I like to do it. Because sometimes we make mistakes with negatives. So I like if I have one of each, I like to arrange it so the plus sign is in the very middle. All right, group and group. What's my GCF between 2x squared and 4x? 2x. Parentheses, what times 2x is 2x squared? Minus what times 2x is 4x? 2. Plus, what's my GCF between 1x and -2? 1. What times 1 is x? What times 1 is -2? 2. And I have the same thing in both parentheses. I'll put my answer over here. So what are my two binomials? X minus 2 and a 2x plus 1. Any questions about that one? No, it doesn't. I can put 2x plus 1 in front of 2x minus 2. As long as the insides stay the same. It doesn't matter order as long as the insides are the same. We're going to do one more, then we're going to do some U-tries, and then I got to show you one more little special circumstance, and then we'll be done. So it's really not much longer. Not much. So, we want two numbers that multiply to get what number, guys and girls? -15. And they're going to add to get what number? That's a crooked number. 14. So, if it multiplies to get a negative, what signs do I need? And the bigger one this time will be a what? Because it adds to get a positive. Very good. So, -1, +15. Got -3, +5. Is that all of them that multiply to get 15? Do either of those add to get 14? Good. And I like to arrange mine so that my plus sign is in the middle. So the 15 is positive, so it needs to go last. So 3x squared minus 1x plus 15x minus. See, when you have two negatives, you can't avoid it. You're going to have a negative in the middle when you have two negatives. It's just going to happen. So, parentheses. What's my GCF in my first group? And then x, right? 1x. Parentheses, what times x is 3x squared? 3x minus what times x is -x? -1. Plus, what's the GCF in the next group? 5. And what times 5 is 15x? Minus what times 5 is -5? And now I'll have the same in both parentheses. So what are my two binomials? And x plus 5. Any questions? Okay. I want you guys to try these two. I'll check them with somebody when you finish. All right, y'all ready? All right, so the first one, when you make your table, you want two numbers that multiply to get what number? 12, and add to get 8. So you got 1 and 12, 3 and 4, and 6. And which one added to get 8? And then you did your grouping, and yours might look in a different order than mine, but I'm going to do it like this. So you split the middle, and then you did grouping, right? And my GCF on my first group is X, and that leaves me with 3X plus 2. Plus my GCF over here is a 2, and that leaves me with 3X plus 2, and they're the same in both, and so my binomials are 3X plus 2 and X plus 2. Raise your hand if you got those two binomials in either order. Any questions about number 1? All right, so number 2, you want two numbers that multiply to get what number? 20, and add to get what number? -9. Now, what kind of signs did you need? 2 negatives. So you can't really help but have a negative in the middle of this one. So you got -1 and -20, -2 and -10, and -4 and -5. So which one added to get -9? Okay, so I'm going to write mine like this. You split the middle. You wrote it differently. Your work will be different, but we should get the same answer. So if I do it this way, my GCF is 4X, and that leaves me with X minus 1. Minus my GCF is 5, and that leaves me with X minus 1 again. So I have a X minus 1 and a 4X minus 5. Raise your hand if you got an X minus 1 and a 4X minus 5. Any questions about those? Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is if there is a negative leading term. What to do when there's a negative leading coefficient. I have a simple solution. Yeah, but I'm going to factor out a -1, okay? So factoring out a -1 is the same thing as dividing everything by -1. It's like factoring out a GCF. I'm just going to have a -1 hanging outside, and I'm going to use brackets because I'm going to have to come back and use parentheses when I do my grouping. So I'm just going to have a -1 outside a bracket, and that's going to change all my signs. So that's going to be a positive 4x squared minus 12x minus 7. So all you have to do if you have a negative leading term, pull out a -1, stick it outside the bracket, change all your signs, and then proceed like normal with the inside of the bracket. Okay, so we're going to multiply this time to get what number? -28, and add to get -12. What kind of signs are we going to need? A negative and a positive, and the bigger one will be negative. So I don't think it's going to be -28 and +1. What else multiplies to get 28? -7, +4. What else? Yeah, -14, +2. And I think that's all of them. Did any of those add to get -12? Good. Okay, so I got my brackets. You got to keep them brackets with that -1 there. And we're going to do my 4 terms inside the bracket. And I'm going to put them in this order so I have a plus sign in the very middle. Any questions so far? I know that those brackets and these parentheses are going to make it look a little congested, but we're still doing the same thing. So I'm going to put parentheses here and here. Keep my -1 just hanging out there all the way down. So inside the first parentheses, I have 4x squared and 14x. So what's the GCF between them two? What about variables? X. And what times 2x is 4x squared? 2x. What times 2x is -14x? -7. Plus, what's my GCF for the next group? So if it's 1, and they're the same in both. So my factors are, keep the -1 as one of them, 2x minus 7, and 2x. Now I'll tell you, if you were doing problems out of the book, and it was one of these situations, they won't have that -1 hanging out there. They'll give the -1 to one of the parentheses, so you might have, instead of -1 times this, you might have a -2x plus 7, where they've changed the sign. Does that make sense? So just watch out for that on a multiple choice test. But for me, leave it like that. Okay. Are y'all good with what to do with the negative in front? Y'all need to see another example, or you think they're good? Y'all good? Okay, well that concludes section 9.6. Have a good spring break. Thanks for tuning in. Yo, 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 what's up, what's up?